Okay, so apparently the Sultanate of Brunei, one of the world's smallest countries, run by one of the world's wealthiest heads of state, is going to introduce a very strict form of Sharia. I'm quoting this directly from the BBC website. The Sultanate of Brunei has announced it will enforce a tough new Sharia law penal code. The code, to apply only to Muslims, is expected to introduce death by stoning for adulterers and the severing of limbs for theft. Brunei already adheres to a stronger form of Islamic law than neighbouring Malaysia and Indonesia, banning the sale and consumption of alcohol. The new code, to be enforced in 6 months, will strengthen that policy. Punishments could also include flogging for such crimes as consumption of alcohol or abortion, according to a copy of the code seen by news agency AFP. Sultan Hassan al-Bolkiah, 67, who is one of the world's wealthiest men, introduced the code, calling it a part of the great history of our nation. The Sultan has already made religious education compulsory for Muslim children and ordered businesses to close during Friday prayers. But until now, Brunei Sharia courts were limited to family matters like marriage and inheritance. Its civil courts are based on British law, left over from the Sultanate's days as a British protectorate. Brunei's citizens have one of the highest standards of living in Asia, thanks to revenues from oil and gas, and enjoy free medical care and education. The Sultan pledged the new code would not change his country's policies, and officials have said in the past judges would be given discretion in sentencing. The code is to be applied only to Muslims, who make up about 2/3 of a population of 420,000. Phil Robertson, Deputy Asia Director for Human Rights Watch, told AFP the situation shows respect for basic civil and political rights is near zero in Brunei. Okay, so a few thoughts on this. First of all, I wouldn't have such an issue with the banning of alcohol. That doesn't particularly hurt anyone. It may be a bit frustrating for people who enjoy a beer, but that in itself is not, I don't particularly take issue with that. But flogging people for having a beer, that's pretty rigid. But what's particularly barbaric here is if they include in this code stoning to death. Now, I should say it's expected to include that. It's not saying it will include that, but it's expected to include that. If that's the case, that is nothing short of barbaric, and I strongly believe that that the international community should really put pressure on Brunei over this. All I can say is the Sultan has a pretty sick sense of greatness if he thinks that stoning women to death is progressive. What a very sick mind he must have. And I'm well aware that he's probably an absolute monarch and people worship the very ground he walks on, but I couldn't care less. If he thinks that stoning to women to death is progressive, then he has a very, very sick mind, and shame on him. Shame on the Sultan of Brunei. And as for the fact that, people will point, oh, look how progressive it is. It's one of the world's wealthiest countries, free healthcare, etc. Yeah, that's great. But what's the point of having all those benefits if you have such a sinister code of law? I mean, for example, flogging women who commit abortions. Well, what about rape cases? Is that going to include women who've been raped? I've always been all easy about Sharia, but it's this particular form of Sharia that includes stoning. Now, I'm aware that not all Sharia is that barbaric. Sharia is quite a broad term, covers a lot of things, but it does include this sort of thing. And how anyone can rationally justify that defies comprehension. It's barbaric. No ifs, buts, or maybes. Stoning someone to death is a evil, barbaric, anti-human, caveman type punishment. And it really has no place in the 21st century, anywhere in the world. There's really nothing that can justify this new penal code. It's just going to make Brunei a laughingstock. And it's sad news. It's definitely not good news in terms of the human rights situation for that part of the world. No doubt the Sultan thinks that his money means he could do whatever he wants, and unfortunately in the Sultanate that's probably true. He's a very, very wealthy man, I don't doubt also there'll be many people who defend him because of the issues to do with healthcare and so on. But whatever way you gloss it over, if this code includes stoning to death, how can any rational mind, how can anyone, to me that just defies comprehension. I don't condone adultery, I certainly don't condone it, and I don't condone theft, I don't condone other crimes. But amputating someone's limbs or stoning someone to death is barbaric and far, far worse than the crimes they supposedly punish. What I would say for thieves is community service, or in some cases maybe a custodial sentence. As for adultery, I take the view that's not the business of the state. I don't condone it. I think adultery is wrong, and it should bring some level of shame to the person who's guilty. But again, there's complex issues behind that. It could well be that the person committing adultery is trying to escape an abusive relationship. We don't know all the cases. But if this code does indeed include stoning to death, that's simply barbaric. Now, no doubt Islamists will come onto this video and call me a racist. Very good. I couldn't care less what Islamists say. I regard Islamists as downright fascists. I really have a very low opinion of them, so I couldn't care less what they say about me. The simple fact is they support stoning to death, and I recognise that for what it is, a barbaric and unhuman act. And many decent people around the world from all countries would agree with that, i.e. that it's a barbaric punishment. I mean, I cannot really grasp the sort of mentality that would condone this. I really can't. And I do think there should be international pressure put on Brunei, especially from countries that have close ties to it. I believe we do, i.e. the United Kingdom, and I do think that we should put pressure on them. And while I'm at it, I don't know if I'll make another video about this, so I'll just include it in this video. I think it's disgraceful that the United Kingdom is being bullied by Sri Lanka over the summit there. I believe we should follow India and Canada and boycott that country, because their attitude to human rights is abysmal. There's been independent reports that have shown the number of disappearances since the Civil War, and alleged rapes by the security forces. The response by the Sri Lankan government is simply to tell people to shut up and to not even properly address these allegations. So I think we should send out a strong message and not go. I don't think Prince Charles should go. I don't think David Cameron should go. And I know David Cameron says he'll raise these issues with President Rajapaksa, but I don't think we should go. I think we should boycott them as punishment for their attitude in this regard. I don't really care how people view that. As far as I'm concerned, human rights are paramount. They really are. To me, human rights must outweigh cultural and religious sensitivities. And this has nothing to do with sovereignty. I'm not calling for us to, invade Brunei or Sri Lanka. I'm saying that when these sort of human rights violations take place, we should use our leadership in the world to speak out against that. And that's not imperialism, that's, I believe, using power for a benevolent purpose, speaking out against something that's absolutely abhorrent. And Islamists can say what they want in the case of Brunei. I couldn't give a damn what Islamists think. I regard Islamists as fascists. That's what they are. They are fascists. So, let them think what they want. A lot of civilized people will understand what I'm saying in this video and understand this form of Sharia for what it is: an absolutely sick, caveman, barbaric, inhumane law. The idea that you can stone a woman to death because she commits adultery, it's just, I can't comprehend that mentality. So shame on the Sultan of Brunei. And again, I think the man has a very perverse sense of greatness. Maybe his wealth has blinded him. I don't know. But I just conclude with this point. It doesn't matter how progressive Brunei is in other ways, i.e. wealth or healthcare and so on. Yeah, that's all very good. But that still doesn't condone what's happening in terms of this law, because it really is quite sinister, and there should be international pressure put on them to reconsider it.